first we need to create the project. So we'll go to File, Project Window, click the New button, so you can type in a name for your project. We'll call it Low Poly Character. And we can leave the underscore project just to let us know that that is a project folder. Click the yellow folder to choose the location of where your project is going to be saved. And so that's going to save out a folder in that location that contains all these different folders inside of it. Then we need to set our project, so go to File, Set Project. Click on your project folder or click once into it and then hit Set. So now in your work folder you should have the project folder inside of there. In the scenes folder is where we'll save our scenes, files, source images is where we're going to save our textures, and images is where any of our renders will be saved out to. Now we're going to set up our image planes using our reference images. So open up your source images folder where you should have copied the front and side images. Now we're going to put our front reference image in the front camera and our side reference image in the side camera. So in the viewport menu, go to View, Import Image, Image Plane, choose the front PNG, and now it's put in a front image plane looking towards the front camera. Now for the side viewport we'll do the same thing. Go to View, Image Plane, Import Image, and choose your side picture. There we go. Now we have two image planes, one using the side camera, one using the front camera. Hit F to frame in and zoom in on them. So we'll select these and use the Move tool to move them up so that way the feet are resting on the grid. And then we'll take the front viewport and push that back, and take the side viewport and push that off to the side. Now we're doing this because we're going to be creating our model in the middle here, and we don't want these image planes to get in our way when we're modeling, so we just move them back. And one of the things that's great about using image planes is that when we hit 4 to go to wireframe, our image planes are not affected by this, so we can see our image behind our model and still work on it in wireframe. So generally, we'll be working in the side and the front viewport with wireframe turned on. If you only want your image planes to appear in the camera that they're associated with and not in the perspective view, then you can just select it, come to the attribute editor, and then choose in this display setting, look through camera. Then you will only see it through the camera that it's associated with. And then if you don't want that, just switch it back to in all views. If you can't select your image plane, something happens, you can always go to your Hypershade window, and in there, as well as our material library, we also have a tab for cameras, and there we can select our image planes and have access to that same attribute editor. Alright, so the next thing we want to do with image planes is want to select them, go over to the channel box, and hit the 4th button to put them into a new layer. You can hit the V to toggle on and off visibility to make sure that they're inside of the layer, and then that 3rd icon, switch that to the letter R, and then the contents of the layer are only rendered. We can't select them or mess with them. If you want to mess with them, just tap back on the R until it's nothing, and now we can edit them again. I recommend putting them in their own layer because when we're trying to right-click and the image plane is present, then it seems to overwrite any of our right-click menus. So a lot of times we have our object selected and we use the right-click menu to get to the different components or the different tools. So we'll have an easier time if we make the image plane not accessible. Now we can begin the model. So we'll use a primitive cube, so we'll go to Create, Polygon Primitives Cube, and then in our front viewport, we'll align the cube to the body and scale it down so it fits the width of the body. Shift right click and select your Insert Edge Loop tool, and click and drag in some edge loops where we're going to need the shape to change. So now we can go to vertex mode and select those vertices and use our scale tool to move the vertices out. important to make sure you're dragging out a marquee selection over the vertices, so that way you're also selecting the vertices behind it. In this orthographic view, we can't necessarily see the vertices because they're directly behind each other. So doing a marquee selection will make sure we select both. Alright, so now if we take a look in the perspective view, we've only done one side, so we'll go over to the side view and line up the vertices with that. So we can select the vertices. Again, we're making sure we do marquee selections. And just click and drag, and just use your move tool to move them roughly along our reference image. Alright, so now if we take a look at that in our perspective view, it's looking pretty good. Now we can go into our other views and just kind of make any little adjustments, move it around. We can hit 3 to go into smooth preview and make sure there's no problems with the model and see how it looks if it were to be smoothed. Hit 1 to go back to regular smoothness. Now we'll right click and go to face mode and select the 2. We'll do a shift right click, extrude face, use the Z axis to pull out some depth, and then click once on one of the scale cube gizmos, and then that will give us a uniform scale tool in the middle, and then just click and scale that down like normal. So that way we can extrude a little inset. Select that new face and do a shift right click, extrude face, and then pull out on the Z to get a lot of depth. If we move the x-axis and try to adjust from side to side where both of the legs are, it's not really going to work because they're going to go at different angles. So instead for this, we'll just hit R to go to our scale tool and then scale them in on the x-axis to bring them closer together. Alright, now it might look a little strange, so we can just use our other axes to kind of clean it up a little bit, and then we can push it down in the y-axis, bring that handle all the way to that middle blue cube, and that's going to align the face so that way they're flat on the floor. So now we'll move on to the arms. Select both of the side top faces, do a shift right click, extrude face, hit one of the cubes to bring up the uniform scale, and then scale it down to inset that face. And then we can just pull out on the Z axis to get some depth there. And now we can hit the G key, which will perform the last action we did, which was an extrude. So we can hit G, and then it'll just extrude that face that we have selected already. And then same thing, we can try to adjust their verticalness, but with the extrude tool they're going to be going at different angles. So just hit W and use your move tool to do that. Then we can use our scale tool to kind of adjust the shape. Alright. Try to make it match up roughly with the reference image. Now we're going to get started on the feet. So we'll select our model, shift right click, insert edge loop, and then click and drag an edge along the bottom of the leg. Select both of those edges and scale them down in the y-axis to just align them. And then we can move them down. And then we'll select the front faces and extrude out the foot from there. After you perform an extrusion, you can hit W and then just move those faces out. We'll switch to our scale tool, and then we'll scale both faces in the Z axis to align them so that way they're both flat. And if we go to object mode and hit 3, and so it's a little funny, so we need to add another edge loop. So we'll do a shift right click, insert edge loop, and add in an edge loop along the bottom of the foot there. And this one doesn't have to be perfect because eventually we're going to only use 1/2 of the model. Okay, so now we can begin the hand. So we'll select the face at the end of the arm, And do a shift right click extrude face, drag that out, and then use the scale tool to clean it up. We only did one arm. We only made one hand because, like I said, after we smooth it, we're going to end up deleting half of the model and then just mirroring the other half over. So in object mode, select the object, do a shift right click, choose smooth, and that will smooth our object and add subdivisions. And so we made that really simple base, and then by smoothing it, we add in some more resolution, and now we really have all the resolution we need. We're going to delete the left half. So we'll go to face mode. We can select that ring of edges around the left side, and then double click to select that whole element of that half of the body, and then delete it. So we'll select our object, go to Edit, Duplicate Special with Options, hit Edit Reset Settings. So for geometry type, we'll choose Instance, and under Scale, that first column, which is the X value, we'll say -1. And so now we've created a copy that was scaled at -1, so it was mirrored over. And it's an instance, so when I grab vertices and edges of this side and move them around or make changes, it's also affecting the other side. So now it's going to be a lot of tweaking, trying to get the shapes right, a lot of going between components, our scale tool and our move tool, and adjusting the shapes of things. So we can select this ring around the foot and scale that out, give it some more volume. We can go to face mode and select the bottoms of the feet, and then use our scale tool. Always make sure you're selecting the always zoom out and make sure you've selected the faces you meant to. And then we'll switch to our scale tool and scale it in the Y to just make it flat. And now we can go to vertex mode and adjust big chunks at a time. Now we can start actually matching this up a little bit better to the reference image, now that we have more resolution to work with here. So we'll adjust the foot and make that match a little bit better. We can switch between our different viewports to help us out with this. Move down the faces of this foot. Just taking that existing geometry and moving it around so it matches the shape of our character. So now let's look at our front viewport, and our foot's a little squished. So let's select it and scale it out. And then we can select more vertices and adjust the shape that way. Scaling it all out at once to get a big change. And then we can come in and grab a few vertices or individual vertices and make smaller changes. There we go, that's looking better. Now let's see. Now it looks like the bottom of the foot is a little small, so let's select these bottom faces and then scale them out in the X. There we go. Now we've got a nicer bottom foot look there. Something else we can do to get kind of a more petite foot looking feel is to just select that edge and delete it. using Control plus backspace. It depends on the look you're going for. I'm just going to stick with a really simple petite foot. So I'll highlight those edges, use Control plus backspace to delete them, and then just take the further back edge and bring that up so it completes the foot. There we go. I think that looks nice. If you were going to make a longer shoe, then you could add more edge loops. It just depends on what kind of detail you're trying to put in there. Now we can work on getting the leg set up with the body, so we'll go to our front viewport. We'll right click and go to vertex mode, and now we can make that line up a little bit better with our front image. So we'll move the foot over. We can start scaling up pieces of the leg and moving them around. We can scale up the thigh. Remember to use marquee selections. And for this scaling, I'm mostly doing it in the x-axis, so scaling it horizontally, because I can't really see the z-axis, so I only want to scale it in that one axis. I don't want to scale it uniformly. So we'll roughly line it up. Looks like we need to move some of the vertices around the crotch a little bit over. So we can select those and push them in, and then now we can adjust the thigh. There we go. And since we're working in an orthographic view, we can click and drag from the middle of the move gizmo. We don't have to use the handles, because in the orthographic view there are only two axes. We can't accidentally adjust the depth from here. When we're working with the vertices that are at the origin of the grid, so like the center of the body, we want to make sure we only move those up in the Y. We don't want to move them left to right, or else it's going to mess up our mirror. But that's something we can always fix later if it happens. So now we'll jump over to the side view and do the same thing. Adjust those vertices, scale to pump up the shape. Alright, and then let's take a look in our perspective view and see how it's doing. Not bad. You can always hit 3 to see what it looks like smoothed. Looks pretty good. Hit 1 to go back to regular smoothness. Now let's see, we're going to adjust the leg a little bit. So let's grab this edge here and bring it up to kind of match with the picture a little better. And then we're going to get started on creating the knee. In object mode, shift right click and choose insert edge loop tool. And then we'll click and drag, and we're going to make 3 lines. So one at the bottom, one at the top, and then a middle one. And then those 3 are going to be our knee. Because in a character, wherever deformation happens, we need to have multiple edge loops. So a knee is a place where your character is going to bend, so we put edge loops there. That looks good. So what we're going to do is knees only deform one way, so we can target weld. The edges in the back of the knee, and we'll still get a good deformation that way. So we'll shift right click, choose target weld tool, and then click on the vertice you want to merge, click and hold, and then drag to the vertice and then drag to the vertice you want it to merge with. And so we'll do this around the back of the leg here. Alright, and so now we can adjust the shape of the knee. And so something that's going to make this easy is if we use our move tool, but we switch its orientation. So holding Control, Shift, and right click, choose component. And now the vertice is going to move along its normal. So it's going to kind of move along the model a little better. So this generally works better with just one vertice at a time rather than like a whole group, because everybody has different normals. So this is really great when you're working on a character model, when you're working on a face, using a component mode like this. So we'll come around and move these vertices so we get a better shape of the knee. We're going to pull out that middle one so we get kind of a point there. So another tool that's really great for when modeling characters is if we wanted to move that edge up and down but keep it along the area we've built up. You can select the edge, shift right click, and choose slide edge loop tool. Now we can drag the middle mouse button left and right, and then our edge is going to go up and down but conform to the shape of the model. So that's really handy for this type of work. And then just give your model a once over, see if there's anything that you want to tweak. Remember, you can always use component mode anywhere on the body. Alright, so now we can work on the arm. So right now first we'll go over to the front viewport and start lining things up. And so our move tool is still set to component, so we'll Control Shift right click and switch that to object. There we go, and now we'll just marquee select and kind of broadly move these vertices where they need to go. And then we can use our scale tool to adjust their alignment, to move them out, move them in. And then let's see how the model looks in perspective view. Now I've just flipped it around, so now I'm looking at the back part of the model and just adjusting the width of the arm how I see it. There isn't really a top reference, so we're just eyeballing it. We'll shift right click, insert edge loop, and put in an edge for the wrist. Then we'll insert another edge loop for the thumb to come out of. Then we'll insert another edge loop to help us build the thumb. Right click and choose two of those side faces, and we'll extrude out a thumb from there. So shift right click, extrude, pull out the depth, and then use your scale tool to adjust the scale to something that looks a little more round. And then we can just adjust its position. We can align those faces and kind of flatten them out, and then use our rotate tool to change the orientation of those faces. Because since the thumb has kind of it comes out at a different angle. And then we'll extrude those faces to build out the rest of the thumb. And then we could just move and scale to get it to look like the thumb. Now we can come in and select those edges individually and start messing with the shape of the thumb. Vertex mode is always good to get these. Vertex mode is, excuse me, gosh. Vertex mode is always a good way to go. And we'll just adjust the vertices to get more of the thumb shape. We can move back the wrist a little bit so we get more of this ramping motion. Alright, I think that looks good. So we can, in object mode, we can hit 3 to see our smooth preview, to see how it's going. Not bad. Hit 1 to go back to regular mode. Now we can set up the elbow. So it's very similar to the knee. We're going to insert some edge loops since that's an area that deforms. So we'll shift right click, insert edge loop tool, and put edge loops around that middle edge loop that we already have. So we end up with 3. Then in object mode, we'll shift right click, choose target weld tool, and we'll weld the top edges together to the vertice in the center. And then we'll go to the bottom and weld those vertices together. And then we can double click to select those edges that we don't need and just control backspace to get rid of them. And now, just like the knee, we have extra edge loops so the elbow can deform. Then we can start tweaking the vertices to get the shape of the elbow. You can control plus shift right click and switch to component mode. Now we can start working on the neck. We're going to use the multi-cut tool to cut in our own edges. So we'll shift right click, choose multi-cut, and then first we will cut out the hole for the neck. Right click when you finish your edge loop, and then we'll draw a line between the corners of this new face, so that way we've kind of drawn in our own little extruded inset. Now in vertex mode, we can switch to the component mode and move these around to round out the shape of where the neck is gonna protrude out from. You can always switch back to object mode, whatever works. Now we'll select the top faces, delete them, and then we can select the edge around the hole. We'll do a shift right click, extrude edge. Use our scale tool to align them to flatten it out by scaling it in the Y. And then we can use our move tool to adjust the neck. We'll do a shift right click and extrude again. Now I want to make that edge in the middle a little smaller, so I can use the scale tool to do that, but it's going to create a hole along the sides. So what we want to do is go to vertex mode, select the vertice, go to your move tool, make sure you're in object orientation. So we can go to the front viewport to make this a little easier. We're going to snap these vertices to the grid. So we'll use the grid in the front viewport. So holding down X and then drag it in the X axis while holding down the X key, and then that way it'll snap to the grid. And there we go. Now our vertices are back, lined up. Now we can begin the head. So we're going to go to Create Polygon Primitive and choose a cube. And then to turn this cube into something a little smoother, more like a sphere, we can shift right click, go to Smooth, and then set the divisions to 2. And then that gives us a nice sphere. And if we compare that to a primitive sphere, we can see that the topology here is all quads, the edge flow is nice, whereas with a primitive sphere, it's all going up to the top. Okay, so now we can use our front and our side viewport to align this sphere with the head. We can scale it up, just get the rough shape. Nope, we don't want to make sure we don't move it left or right, so we'll make sure our translate X is zeroed out, so that way that middle line is on the origin of the grid. And now we're going to come in and start adjusting our vertices. Still continuing to do our marquee selection to make sure we get the vertices behind there. Now we're going to add in some more resolution, so we'll shift right click, insert edge loop tool, drag down an edge in the middle there. That's going to help us. And then one in the middle of that. And then now we can start moving these down and changing the shape. We'll switch to vertex mode so we can have a little more control. And now we'll use that new resolution we have to create that nose and mouth area. Then we'll insert another edge loop higher up here. See how that looks in the perspective view, how the head is coming along. And so we need a lot of that resolution so that way we can get the facial details, but for the back of the head there's not really a reason to have that. So we can come in with our target weld tool and weld vertices along the side to just kind of get rid of some of those extra edges. The left side. And then that reminds me, eventually we're going to end up duplicating this guy as well. So let's just delete the left half the same way we did the other one. Click, hold down shift and click to get the edge ring, delete that, and then double click to select the element and delete that. Select the other half and go to edit and duplicate special. Nice. Now we can just double click to select that edge loop that we don't need and do a control backspace to delete that. And now we can work in our component mode and start adjusting the shape of the head. Alright, now we can model the ear, and so we'll do that by creating a cube. And we'll just scale it down, get a rough size, and move that roughly in position, kind of just next to the head. We'll match it up to the side viewport. We can go into vertex mode and start getting the shape. And then we'll want to extrude out more. And then we'll want to extrude out more. So we'll go to face mode, grab the top face, shift right click and extrude. And then we'll do the same thing for the bottom face. Select it and extrude that. Now we're going to insert an edge loop along the middle of the ear, so that way we have more resolution to work with. We can make it a bit rounder. So we'll drag down this bottom edge. Now we can grab this front part of the middle edge loop and then bring that inwards, and that could be kind of like the inner part of the ear. And then we'll grab the whole front half of it, all those vertices, and then rotate it forward. And then of course we can just use the move tool to kind of narrow it a little bit. It's not bad. Whoops. And we'll go to our target weld tool, and we can just weld those edges that we don't need. Alright, and there we have a nice little ear. So now we can just move it into place. And since it's a separate object, it's just going to be penetrating the mesh. So we'll go ahead and freeze the transformations. So we'll go to Modify, Freeze Transformation. So now we're going to combine the head object with the ear. So we'll select the head side, the ear, and then do a shift right click, combine. And then we can delete the history, and now we've got those pieces. And now that's all one object. Then we want to combine the head to the side of the body, so that way we can weld them together. So we'll select it, do a shift right click, combine. It's usually a good idea to model the body and the head separately and then attach them. So we need to create an area where it's going to attach on the head. So what we're going to do is go to face mode, double click to select the entire, all the head faces, and then at the top of the viewport click the isolate button, so that way all we see is the faces that were selected. And so now we can go to our multi-cut tool and do what we did to create the neck. We're going to cut in our own we're going to cut in our own area where that's going to be connected. So we use the multi-cut tool, right click when you're finished with the edge, and make sure you connect it up so it's all quads. And so now, just like how we created the faces the neck came from, now we have a nice round area where the neck can now connect to. So it's a little off, but we'll fix it. So let's adjust the vertices that make up that hole and use the side view to kind of align it a little better. Alright, that seems okay. That's a bit better. So now we'll go to face mode, select those two faces, and delete them. Now we can go to target weld, and weld the vertices of the neck to the vertices of the head. Alright, and so it's a little funky, but we can come in and adjust that. We'll go ahead and insert an edge loop between them. And then we'll adjust the way that edge loop looks. Now we've messed up the alignment of those middle vertices, so we just go over to our front view, hold down X, and snap those to the grid. There we go. So now we're just coming in and tweaking it, adjusting it, making it look even. Now we're ready to delete our duplicate and actually mirror this guy. So we'll delete it, select the half, shift right click, and choose mirror polygon and choose the axis that we want to mirror it along. And now we can select the whole object and go to Mesh Display, Soften Edge, just to get rid of any faceted edges so it's all smooth. So we can come in and still keep tweaking away. Sometimes after combining it we can see things with that center edge that we didn't notice before. Alright, so it looks pretty good. So now we can move on to UV unwrapping this.